Hello and thank you for watching the Angry Rooster Creations channel. Today I have a video that is a bit of a departure from my previous videos on this channel because today I'm tackling a woodworking project, and in this video I'll be turning a set of 9 pins or skittles for yard bowling. Now this is a project I started a while back and I sort of let it fall by the wayside. The first 3 pins that I made were turned out of red oak, and I did not film that. The rest of the pins that you will see me turn, as well as the ball that you'll see me turn, are made from white oak. I work in a family-owned cabinet shop with my dad, and I glued all these up out of scraps that we had left over from previous jobs. So I was making use of some waste material that we had on hand. Oak is not necessarily the best wood for this purpose, but it's a decently hard wood and it should hold up pretty well. Now, before we get too far in the video, I would like to say that I am a novice when it comes to turning on a wood lathe. So if there are some of you out there watching this right now that are wood turners, whether you're a hobbyist or maybe you even turn professionally and sell finished pieces, you're going to see a lot of things here that are going to potentially be questionable. You might be like, why did he do that? Why is he doing it this way? It's ignorance and lack of experience. I have done extensive lathe work, but the lathe work I've done in the past has been metal work. I began working as a machinist. I actually went to a trade school to become a machinist. And as far as the tools and things you're seeing here, the real wood turner in the family is my dad. He is actually quite a skilled wood turner. I just have not had as many hours on the wood lathe, so this is a skill that I'm not the best with. And so you're actually going to see me use a lot more of the easy wood tools here, rather than using skew chisels and like gouges and things. And that's mostly due to lack of experience. I understand the basic mechanics of how the easy wood tools are supposed to work because it's a lot like an indexable insert cutter that I would use on a metal lathe. But there's a lot more skill that goes into using things like skew chisels and gouges, and a more skilled wood turner could use those to much greater effect than what you'll see me do in this video. But like I said, that's just due to lack of experience on my part. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I know there's going to be some people who are going to see things in this that are going to be questionable to them, and that's why. Now, before I go ahead and show you more of the turning, I wanted to talk a bit about what inspired this project. When I was in the 7th grade, we read the story Rip Van Winkle. And the picture you're seeing on screen right here is an illustration of part of that story. When Rip Van Winkle's out hunting, he comes up on a group of dwarves, and they're playing a game of 9 pins while they're having this sort of party. And this is the first time I ever heard of 9-pin bowling, or a game of 9 pins. Now, here in the United States, we really only ever see 10-pin bowling, like modern bowling. I believe there's places in parts of Texas where they actually do bowl with 9 pins, but that's kind of it. Everywhere else, you just see 10-pin bowling. And actually, when I was a little kid, like before I started elementary school, my mother and my grandmother actually bowled in a bowling league. So I spent a lot of my sort of preschool years, if you will, in the bowling alley with my mother. So I was very familiar with 10-pin bowling. And like I said, until I read this story, I never even knew that 9-pin bowling was a thing. I thought it was odd. Well, I sort of forgot all about this for quite a while until I was talking to a man I work with, and he was mentioning somebody he met looked like Rip Van Winkle. And it just kind of brought that story back into my mind. And so I sort of fell down a rabbit hole researching 9-pin bowling. And through what I could find, it's a very old game. Like you see in this picture here, it goes back hundreds of years. But in the UK, they still actually play 9-pin bowling. over there they call it skittles, or sometimes they refer to it as pub skittles, and there's probably a few other names for it. And the rule sets and the pin styles can vary quite drastically from region to region, from what I understand. And so for me, as a foreigner, it's a bit hard for me to actually make heads or tails of the specific styles of play that they use when playing the game. Now, the version of the game that I'm making in this video is for outdoor play, and I'll be turning a ball to throw later in the video. And some styles, they use a sort of wooden discus that they call a cheese. And I may make a cheese in the future for that style of play, but, in this video and for what you're going to see here and for how I generally intend to play the game, I'm going to be using a ball. And now from what I've seen, each player usually gets 3 throws, so it would probably be best to turn 3 balls. But in this video, you're only going to see me turn 1. I've only got 1 right now, but I do plan on making 2 more in the future. Just, if anything else, to make the game go a little faster so somebody can throw 3 balls and throw their 3 balls per frame, so to speak, without having to have somebody be, a human ball return and roll the ball back every single throw. Now, I am going to talk about this pen, the things that I'm going to be doing while I'm turning this pen. As you can see right now, I just stuck the square block in the lathe and sort of trued it up, and for the most part got it to be a cylinder. What I'm doing here, I am marking where the 2 widest points are going to be, and also marking where the thinnest point is going to be for the neck, if you will, of the pen. So that, up near the tailstock, that first mark is where the largest diameter of the head of the pen is. The next mark is the thinnest diameter of the neck of the pen. And then the last mark that's farther down is the widest diameter of the bottom. And I'm doing this because you're about to see me use this parting tool here and a caliper, and I'm comparing this to the drawing that I did of the pen shape. And I'm trying to hit the 2 major diameters there, and then hit that neck diameter, so I pretty much get those to the diameters that they're supposed to be, and then I begin turning the profile to match. And I do have a wooden profile gauge that I made that you'll see here in a minute. Now, like I said before, I'm a novice at this. I've seen guys hold the parting tool in one hand and then hold the caliper in the other hand, and essentially take the part to depth with the parting tool while simultaneously using the caliper, and as soon as the caliper crosses over the part, they just stop. I don't really feel comfortable doing that. I'm just always worried I'm going to twist the parting tool and have it snag in the slot and get it yanked out of my hand and get chucked across the shop. And because of that, I did actually overshoot a few of my diameters that I was trying to hit. So on some of my pens, you might see later in the video that there's random grooves in those parts. It's because I overshot the diameter I was shooting for with the parting tool. Like I said, I'm a novice wood turner. And here, like I said before, you're going to see I'm doing a lot of this turning with these easy wood tools. They're essentially scrapers. And, a more skilled wood turner would generally default to gouges and skew chisels. In fact, there was a video I watched of somebody turning a skittle set, and he pretty much did the entire project with a skew chisel. Like, all of it. And, I'm just not as skilled with those. Those do actually take more of a skill, whereas the easy wood tools, you kind of just keep them flat and push them into the part, and they turn. They just don't leave the nicest surface finish, and you have to do a lot more sanding after the fact. Now here you do see me actually pulling out this gouge, partly because I'm trying to take off less material, and also try to get a smoother surface finish here, because I'm getting pretty close to the final profile that I need. And you're seeing me pull out my profile gauge here, and I'm putting pencil mark on the high spots where I need to remove excess material. Now the pin that I'm showing here, this might be the one that I end up making into the king pin, which you'll see later. I believe this is probably the best, most accurate to my drawing pin that I made. Like I said, these are not perfect. There is variation between the pins, because like I said before, I am, not the most skilled lathe turner. But you're kind of seeing the process I went by. Now, it would have probably looked better had I, used a longer piece of stock and actually turned a full ball on the end of the head here. But for the sake of simplicity, I just wanted to cut my stock to 10 inches, which is how tall the pins are. And the biggest diameter on these pins is about 3 3/8 in diameter, and the base is about 2 inches in diameter. Now, from what I could see, it seems like a lot of pins are like 3 inches at the base, 4.5 inches in the middle, and anywhere between 10 to 14 inches high. And a lot of them don't actually have heads. Like that one picture I showed earlier, which was the actual photograph, they're sort of just a symmetrical, tapered on both ends shape without an actual head on it, like a 10-pin bowling pin that, like I said, you're used to here in the States. Probably just for the sake of it's what I'm used to seeing, I turned that more traditional 10-pin shape here, but, maybe sometime in the future I'll actually try to make a more proper size and proper shape. I guess you would call it a pub skittle. But for right now, this is just sort of what I drew up. And also, I drew this size because while I was using scrap materials, there was kind of I was kind of constrained on how big I could make those and make use of the scrap that I have. So I couldn't necessarily make the pins that much larger. Otherwise, I would have had to have cut, unused stock. And usually for projects like this, I just try to use up odds and ends scrap that's probably going to go into the burn pile anyways, rather than cut new material, if I can avoid it. But anyways, you're seeing me, I'm kind of sanding to finish. I probably should have moved that tool rest a little farther out before I started sanding here. But I did 100 grit, 120 grit, and then that last little pad there is a lever buffing pad. I think they're like a 320 grit. I'm not entirely sure. They say they're 100 grit, but trust me, they're not 100 grit. They're something much finer. They have their own sort of scale that they set their grits on. Alright, so this one you're seeing me turn right now is the last pin in the set. Now, I made a little bit of a mistake. When I grabbed the stock to glue up for this pin, I grabbed some pieces that were actually not quite wide enough. So this pin actually ended up with a little bit of a flat spot on, or 4 little flat spots. Not much, but yeah, this one does have some little flat spots. And that was unfortunate. For what it is, it's not going to hurt the function of the game. It's just not aesthetically pleasing. Now, what you see here, this is the configuration of how the pins are set up during play. The 9 pins are set up in a diamond shape, like this. Now, sometimes either that front pin, the head pin, or that center pin are what's called the king pin. And you're about to see me stain the head on one pin. I only did this to one. This is going to be the king pin, just depending on how the pins would be set up for play. But in some rule sets, if the king pin hasn't been toppled, then any of the pins that have been knocked over do not count towards your score. So in some versions of this game, you have to knock over the king pin before any other pins count. So if on your first throw you knock down 5 pins and none of those are the king pins, those 5 pins don't count. And unless you knock down the king pin on your next 2 throws, until he falls over, any other pins that get knocked over don't count. So it can be quite hard, and you'll see me throw some balls at some setups here at the end of this video, and it is actually surprisingly hard. this version of the game. Now here I am turning this ball. This ball, I probably set this up the wrong way. Originally I was going to make the ball out of hickory. I failed to find pieces of scrap hickory that were a size I needed to make the ball, so I just went ahead and glued it up out of some of the scrap oak that we had. Now, I did a 3-piece stack, and I turned the grain so that on the 2 top pieces, the grain is 90 degrees to the piece in the center. The idea was, it's going to impact the pins. I don't want it to split. The problem is, when I turn this, this meant that the diameter, while I was turning the major diameter as it sit here in the lathe, I was turning into end grain almost the entire time. So it was not fun to turn. I realized that I probably glued this blank up the wrong way once I started turning. Like I said, novice wood turner here. Now, I know certain bowl glue ups that people do, you would have to turn end grain, but it could have been much better than what it was. And it's not perfectly round. I don't have a chuck, or we don't have a chuck for this lathe. So some of the things you can do to actually get a perfectly spherical ball where you part the ends off and you can turn the ball 90 degrees and turn. I wasn't able to do that. I just tried my best to get it spherical according to my little gauge that you see there and get it as close as I could. And then I sort of turned down the waist at the head and, at the headstock and the tailstock here. And I ended up sawing these off with a dovetail saw and then just kind of sanding the top to finish. Now, unfortunately, the camera did die on me there, so you didn't get to see me finish that one completely, finish all the work on the ball. But here I am applying a wipe-on polyurethane. This is actually a Watco wipe-on polyurethane. I put 2 coats on the pins and on the ball. You can do other types of finish. This just tends to be a pretty hard-wearing finish, and it puts a good layer on there, and it's easy to apply. So that's why I chose to use it. Now, what you're watching right here, I took a piece of cardboard and I marked and cut holes in that piece of cardboard at roughly spaced at 10 inches so I could spray dots on the ground to be guides for where I set up the pins. And here you're seeing me actually sort of playing a game. I'm going to do 10 frames. Now, I should have ran a push mower through the yard on the lowest setting just to cut a straight lane, because one thing I noticed is rolling this ball through the grass was not cut as low as it could have been, and that did actually interfere with the ball. Also, there are imperfect spots in the yard. The yard's fairly flat here, but you can see the ball bouncing. If the grass was cut lower and if this was a more level spot of the yard, you wouldn't see that as much. Now, that 8 you just saw me throw there is going to be the best frame, if you will, for this entire, sort of 10-frame game. Now, you will notice, for instance, that throw, I did not take out the kingpin on that first hit. If you were playing by kingpin rules, those 4 pins I knocked out would not have counted. And as you can see, my next 2 throws didn't get anything. So that would have been a complete scrub. You would have got a score of 0 if you were playing kingpin rules. And then, right there, the ball bounced over that outside pin. And that's another thing too, because this ball does not weigh that much, sometimes it'll hit pins and it'll either just bounce off instead of blowing through, or it'll hit the pins and like a Newton's cradle, it'll hit a pin square on and knock that pin over and stop dead in its tracks. It's kind of it's an odd thing. It's not like what you would typically see with, modern, heavier bowling balls on a greased lane in a game of 10 pins. So, you're just kind of watching it as I'm playing. Now, one thing you kind of can't see from this camera angle, unfortunately, is there are several times that the ball did curve. And it doesn't curve like how you can intentionally curve a ball on a greased lane. It would hit either a lump in the ground or a clump of grass or something, and that would deflect the ball at an angle. So some of these that are completely missing, when I was throwing the ball, it looked like it was going straight into the pins, and then it would hit a clump of grass or something and just, you know, skitter off into some odd direction. And then sometimes the ball, like that right there, it would just bounce and go completely over the group of pins. So this is actually much harder than I thought it would be. Now, when I started playing, I paced off 10 paces, which is roughly 30 feet. From what I've seen on the rule sets, they can play anywhere from 24 to 36 feet of an alley or lane length. Generally, that length is going to be between 24 to 30 feet. Now, having done this test game in the future, I think I would set the lane up to be 24 feet because of just how difficult this actually is. And like I said before, definitely cut through your grass on like the lowest setting on your lawnmower to get that grass as low as possible. Now on this final sort of frame, I want you to look at the tree line in the background. Once it resets the pins for this next one, you'll see here in just a second. So up in the top right, behind that tree, you like to see a little bit of movement. And then this next cut, you're going to see a deer walking through in the background of the video. And she just kind of watched me reset the pins and didn't run off. It's a doe. I think she has a fawn back there in the trees, but I just wanted to point that out. She made a cameo. And so now for this sort of outro, I kind of want to go over a little bit of what I've kind of sort of pieced together from what I could find about rules of how you play this sort of 9 pins, you know, bowling / skittles. It seems that a lot of cases, the game's usually played with 6 players, oftentimes on 2 teams of 3 players. And the games I've been able to watch videos of that I've found on YouTube, it's actually kind of hard to find these. At least for me, it was. It seems that, you know, each players get 3 throws, and they alternate. One person from one team, one person from the next team, you know, they switch up and they alternate. So everybody throws their sort of frame, as it would be in 10-pin bowling, but it's for what's called a leg. And at the end of the leg, they tally up the players' scores on each team, and whichever team has the highest score for the leg, they take that leg. And the first team to win 5 legs wins the game. So I guess there would be a maximum of 9 legs that could be played. And I think if they tie for the leg, they start counting back of whoever was the last player on the team to play and which of those frames had the higher score. So, you know, you go to the last player for each team, and whichever one of those players had the higher score, I think that's how they break the tie. Or they scrub that leg entirely and replay it. I'm not entirely sure on that. There's a little bit of a gray area there. And that's for that version of the game. I've also seen versions where apparently you play to a specific point value, like you would set 50 points, for instance. Now, on that little game you just saw me play, it took 10 frames, I got 49 points. Well, if you're playing to a specific point count, on my next frame, I would have to hit 50 points exactly. This is how I've seen people play to a set number of points. You have to hit those points exactly. So that means I would have to throw the ball and only knock out 1 pin. If I walked out more, that frame would get scrubbed. And I'd have to keep going till I hit just 1 pin to hit exactly on 50 points. I've seen some people play that way. And then from what I can see in the more antiquated style, or like if you, of this sort of outdoor play, like I was doing here, and especially if you play a version of the game that uses a cheese, instead of actually rolling a ball on the ground, in some cases they throw overhand and either throw the ball or the cheese directly at the pins, or in some cases it has to contact the ground once and bounce before it hits the pins. And you're not supposed to roll the ball. So there's a lot of different ways to play this game. Now, if anybody out there is, say, from the UK and you happen to stumble upon my video and you have played Skittles or Pub Skittles or, you know, whatever you guys call it over there, and you could drop down there in the comment section a comment to kind of explain the rules of how you play the game, it would be much appreciated, because I'm trying to learn how, like, ways that you actually play this game with, you know, a proper rule set. Because I'm kind of finding bits and pieces here and there. Some of it's contradictory, you know, some of it's kind of conflicting. And I think it's because I'm finding multiple rule sets of different ways to play the same game. So, you know, if anybody out there has actual knowledge of a more proper way to play, I am all ears, and I would very greatly appreciate if you'd let me know down there in the comments. And that's pretty much going to do it for me for this video. If you've watched this long, I thank you very much for, you know, sitting and watching this video. You know, if you got something out of it, if you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate a like down there. And maybe if you liked what you saw here, you might consider subscribing. It would really help me out. Now, this video is a little bit different than a lot of the other videos on my channel, but I do intend to do kind of more videos like this going forward. I mean, my channel is called Angry Rooster Creations. I have a lot of different creative hobbies, woodwork, metalwork, you know, drawing, art, etc. So, you know, I'll kind of jump around. It'll always be something creative that I'm doing, but it's going to kind of jump around between sort of hobbies or maybe even occupational things that I do. So you'll see more woodworking projects. I do plan on doing more art projects in the future. So it'll maybe a little bit of everything, but it's always going to be something that is of a creative and constructive nature that you'll see on my channel. Or it'll be me talking about sort of tools of the trade, if you will, like in some of the videos I've done on, you know, pen and ink supplies. So if those things sound like things that interest you, I would really appreciate a subscription. And I hope to keep making more content like this, and hopefully my video editing skills will also get better in the future. This is the longest video I've made so far, or more specifically, the most amount of footage that I have had to edit down. When I started, I had over 3 hours of footage, and I managed to get this down to, I believe, sub 30 minutes. I'll have to see the final run time when I finish the video. But with all that having been said, I thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.